Playing with Minimoog because today we're going to talk about Minimoogs. As you may have guessed from the t-shirt, from the old Minimoog here, it's a bit of a Moogy theme on Sonic Academy. Because how long have we been doing Sonic Academy for? And there's never been anything on the Minimoog. Like the foundational synth, the one that starts the whole idea of a synth and a keyboard and this kind of layout. That's this guy. We've not talked about it till now, so we're going to put that right today. I'm Matt Thomas, King Unique, blah blah blah, Sonic Academy, yada yada yada. I just wanted to get straight into the Moogs. Before I go any further on the Moogs, yes, Moogs. But I'm going to keep saying Moogs. We've discussed this elsewhere. Unfortunately, I first heard about Moogs before the internet, and nobody could tell me I was wrong. So I always hear Moog when I see Moog. And I know it should be Moog, but I'm going to keep saying Moog. But here's the interesting thing. In researching this little feature we're doing here, I discovered that actually even Bob Moog got it wrong, because Moog is actually a Dutch name, and so it should be pronounced Moog, sort of like a kind of sound, yeah? So it's a Minimoog, and I'm not going to start calling it that, so if you'll forgive me, it's a Minimoog for today. Right, so we're going to look at the history of Minimoogs. We'll do that in a sec. If you don't want to do the history, you can skip on by. If you do want to do the history, because you're a cerebral, thoughtful kind of a gent, stay here. We're going to talk about the software recreations of Moogs, because we've got a few to look at. We're going to talk about how you might copy Moog sounds in software you've already got. So we're going to do quite a lot of mini-Moogy stuff. So let's get started. It's 1970. Wow, so that's vivid, isn't it? I drew an image in your mind, like, you know, bell bottoms and space hoppers. So it's 1970, right? Bob Moog has been making Moog modulars for like the last 5-6 years. They've begun to kind of penetrate into the studio market. Wendy Carlos, who was Walter Carlos at the time, has made a big hit with Switched On Bar. So people like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and all kinds of people have been buying these things. And that's all great. But 1970 is not such good news. Suddenly, the market for this Wonder synth, it dries up. It just kind of like vanishes down to like a tenth of what they were selling. Now Bob Moog's just hired a bunch of new engineers, and so all these guys are sitting around ready to make wall-to-wall Moog modulars, and suddenly they're not really selling. So Bob Moog's out on the road trying to get these things to sell, and the engineer's back at the fort are thinking, I'd like to keep this job. I've just moved up to New York to do this. I don't want to lose a job. So one of these engineers is a guy called Bill Hemsworth. Now, he is in the attic at the Moog factory because there's so little space with all these new employees. He's up there, and in the attic, as well as Bill, is a big graveyard of broken Moog bits. There's sort of dying modules, broken keyboards, burnt out bits and pieces. In his lunch hour, he's thinking to himself, whenever somebody comes to buy one of these Moog modulars, we have to spend like half an hour patching cables just to get a sound out of it. Wouldn't it be nice to have a little demo machine that was already set up so I can just turn it on, play it, and we can demo what these amazing things do? So he decided to build one using the scrap in the attic. So in his lunch hours, he'd ferret around and see what he could find. And over a course of like several weeks, he found enough bits and pieces, like, you know, broken keyboards and stuff like that, to pull it together into a little synth, which he called the Min A, okay, which we'd now call the Minimoog A, the first prototype, the Minimoog. Now, I'm just going to draw your attention to this. This is like probably the most influential synth in history, okay? And the very first one was made from junk, like broken junk. Now that's like Steve Jobs going, I've got this idea for a phone, and just nipping down to the Apple warehouse floor and like finding two broken like old Macs and some sort of smashed iPods and going, yeah, I'll just glue these together and tape them a bit and ta-da, iPhone. That's how this started. It's pretty unbelievable, but there you go, it did. So he makes this Min A, and he shows it to Bob Moog himself when Bob's back, and Bob goes, yeah, it's interesting, yeah. And, you know, Bill Hemsworth goes, yeah, it's interesting. And neither one of them's got a big plan for it, because at this point, lots of guys are doing little projects and ideas, and most of them don't lead anywhere. They're just like little test beds, little kind of, you know, prototypes. So that's that. However, with this sudden collapse in the sales, lots of other engineers are going, look, we could really do with like a cheap performance instrument, couldn't we? One that like sells to like normal people, like musicians, not just like universities or like whole massive studios. So what about like working on that a bit more, Bill? So Bill Hemsworth makes a Min B. Now this is a fancy thing, because whereas the A looked like it'd been pretty much pulled together from broken pieces, as it was, The Min B has got a really fancy case. It's got 3 oscillators instead of the 2 on the A, and it's starting to have that fantastic layout where the controls go left to right. Now, we've seen that, of course, on so many synths since, but it was a brand new idea. He just sketched it one morning. He thought, yeah, okay, I'll start the noises off, bring them across, they'll go into a mixer, into a filter. Yeah, and out the far side. So left to right was Bill Hempstead's idea, and we think of it as completely standard on synths these days. We don't even see it anymore. It's so common. So Bob Moog comes back from trying to sell Moog modulars again and finds that there's now a Minimoog B, and he's like, okay, well, yeah, it's kind of cool, and I can see the appeal of the instrument, so yeah, it's now a real thing. We're going to make a Minimoog, okay. But we'll do another version, and we need to get a better case and fancier ideas. So we get some really fancy cases designed, and nobody really likes them. All the people they show it to say, "Oh, we like that case, the one like the last one your designers put forward, like a little footnote, the wooden one where like the panel flips up." So that's how this case comes to be. All the sort of super fantastic, futuristic space age stuff. Nah. It also gets the mod wheels. They're brand new. Nobody ever done pitch wheels and mod wheels before. So that's another super little innovation inside the Minimoog. So the Minimoog C is there, and it kind of looks like a great thing. And Bob is like off selling and sort of demoing this stuff. And he says, right, when I get back, we'll do like a version D, and then when that's been tweaked, we'll do a version E, and probably that'll be production version. We'll do it then, okay? Because it's my company. It doesn't have to say that. It is. So he goes off, and all the engineers go, but I don't think there'll be a company when he gets back if we don't have something to sell real soon. So they look at the C and they go, you know what, I think that's fine. So let's get the circuit boards made properly and start making some. So they begin making Model Ds, the final finished thing as far as they're concerned. And they get 10 of these together before Bob Moog comes back, and he's not best pleased, put it mildly. Apparently he spoke his mind in quite forthright terms and let them know that this was not a good thing and he is the boss and they are not. Nonetheless, he didn't really have much choice. His arm was being twisted. These 10 Minimoogs were ready to sell, and the company desperately needed a product. So that was it. The Minimoog D became the Minimoog, the one we all know today. And they start selling, and they keep selling, and they sell 12,000 units, which is a serious amount of synths in those days. But there is one slight sad subtext to this. Pretty much from the minute they finish making those first 10, the financial problems at the Moog company just get out of hand. And so Bob has to actually sell the company to somebody else. Even though he still works there, it becomes somebody else's firm. And in time, Bob leaves and the later Moogs aren't really his. And so sadly, the Minimoog didn't save the Moog firm for Bob himself, but it did become the archetype synth for pretty much the next 5-10 years of synths that followed. It stayed in production until the early 80s, and at that point it finally closed down. The DX7 came along, everybody wanted, sleek digital synths. And that was the end of the Minimoog, you'd think. But of course we know it wasn't, not remotely. By the late 80s, there's a company called Studio Electronics, and they will take your Moog, rip the guts out of it, and put it in a nice big rack mount, 19-inch rack mount, and MIDI it up. And so you've got a MIDI Moog. And this was so popular, they began making their own clone, the SE1, which was a purpose-built copy of a Moog with modern MIDI spec. And then by the mid-90s in the UK, a guy notices that Bob Moog's trademark has lapsed, and so he buys it, a guy from Caerphilly in South Wales. So he begins making Welsh Minimoogs, or Minimoogs as they say in Wales. And these sound great, but unfortunately he only makes about 5, and then he goes out of business as well. Now that takes us to the end of the 90s and the arrival of the VST soft synth era. And what was one of the very first VST synths on the market? Steinberg's Model E, a direct copy of a Minimoog. So you see straight away, the minute a new technology comes along, this incredibly influential instrument reappears again, straight away. Now, it wasn't as all singing and all dancing and all fancy as a contemporary current Minimoog VST we might get our hands on. But at the time, it sounded fantastic. I used it, loads of people used it. I used to be remixing really sort of big major label artists at the time. And all of a sudden, everybody's stems had loads of Minimoog parts in them, and there was no buzz or hum or hiss on these Minimoogs. Almost as if everybody was hammering this little VST. There was a company called Creamware, kind of like the UAD of the time, and they had a DSP board that ran software solution, same as the UAD, and they had a thing called the Minimax, their own version of the Minimoog. And Hans Zimmer loved it. He used to say how it sounded better than his real Moogs. And eventually they made a hardware box that looked like a Minimoog with their software inside. So Minimoogs moved across into the digital era quite successfully. And about this point in the mid-2000s, Bob Moog himself comes back to making Minimoogs, and this wonderful beast here, the Minimoog Voyager, is the result of this. Now, the Minimoog Voyager is an updated Minimoog with MIDI control and touch panels and memories and all kinds of wonderful stuff, and it sells actually more units than the original Minimoog, about 13 or 14,000, I gather. And then in 2016, Moog began making Minimoogs, the original Minimoog, again. So they do that for a year, and finally they go like, no, that's enough Minimoogs. At which point Behringer step in and go, no, more Moogs for everybody, and Moog's at 1/10 of the price. At which point Moog go, all right, well, if you can do Moogs that cheap, we'll go one better. We'll do free Moogs. And at the start of the COVID lockdown, Moog were giving away their iPad Mini Moog D app for nothing. Well, you've got to pay for it now, but it's still pretty cheap. So the Mini Moog's been with us now for 50 years. It's gone through all kinds of forms: the physical Mini Moog, re-racked MIDI Mini Moogs, software Mini Moogs, software hardware Mini Moogs, iPad Mini Moogs, new analog Mini Moogs. They've all been there, and it's still going. I don't know what the next part of the story is, but I can guarantee you there's more Moog to come. So that's the Moog history, the Moog story. What we're going to do now is we're going to look at a few of the current best Mini Moog software synths out there. We're going to compare them. Then we're going to look at how you might make some Moog sounds even with the software you've got today without spending a penny. And then I reckon I'm going to go and collapse and stop saying Moog, because it's like it's starting to haunt my dreams. All I can see and hear and think is Moog. 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 Moog.
Thanks everybody for watching, commenting and indeed liking. We really do appreciate all the support we get here on our Sonic Academy YouTube channel. So if you found this video super useful, please, we'd love you to hit the subscribe button. We update the YouTube channel every week with new content. And if you want to watch some more relevant content, just click on the videos beside me.